It was a Tuesday, one of those mornings where the coffee doesn't kick in and the news is just noise. I was in my squad car, 2 blocks from a domestic dispute call, when my phone buzzed. Private number. I rarely pick up private calls while on duty. But something told me to answer. I tapped the earpiece. "This is Officer Miles." A hesitant voice responded. Nervous. "Mr. Miles? This is Principal Harding from Roosevelt Middle School." Immediately my stomach tightened. My daughter, Amira, goes there. She just started 8th grade. "Is Amira all right?" I asked, gripping the steering wheel. There was a pause. One of those long, cold silences that you already know means bad news. "She's not hurt, sir. But she's been involved in an incident. A serious one." "What kind of incident?" "I think it's best if you come in." Made the decision to expel her. I froze. Expel? My Amira? She's never been in trouble. Never missed homework. Never even raised her voice in class. Expel? I asked slowly, like I didn't understand the word. She was disrespectful. Aggressive. But she used language that's inappropriate in a school setting. And she refused to leave the classroom. "Let me get this straight," I said, voice sharpening. "You're expelling a straight-A student over attitude?" She hesitated again. "It's more complicated than that." "Then explain it." "I'd really prefer to have this conversation in person. Today." She hung up. Not a request. The summons. I sat there in silence, hands still on the wheel. The police radio buzzed again, but I didn't hear it. All I could see was Amira, bright-eyed, quick-witted, my little girl with a passion for science and anime and arguing over cereal brands like it was politics. And now she was being expelled. For being loud? Aggressive? Refusing to leave? 3 words I've seen in too many case files. 3 words they've used to box up kids who look like mine, long before they ever grow up. I radio dispatch. Unit 17, I'm going off call. Personal emergency. To Roosevelt Middle, 12 minutes. Then I flipped on the siren, not because it was urgent, but because sometimes a father doesn't walk in as a man. He walks in as a badge. And I knew, whatever this was, it wasn't going to be fair. And it sure as hell wasn't going to be over the phone. Roosevelt Middle stood like every other school I'd ever driven by, plain brick walls, faded flags, and bulletin boards trying too hard to feel cheerful. But that morning, as I stepped out of the squad car in full uniform, the building felt different. Heavier. Like it already knew what I was about to walk into. The security guard at the front entrance saw me and stood straighter. I nodded, didn't stop. Inside, the front desk secretary blinked when she saw the badge on my chest. "Officer? Mr. Miles?" "Yes." "Principal Harding called me." She cleared her throat. "She's waiting in her office. Down the left hall." I walked past the glass trophy case, filled with soccer medals and spelling bee ribbons, but I couldn't stop noticing something else. Eyes. Teachers in the hallway went quiet. Students whispered. I heard one of them say under her breath, "That's Amira's dad." The words hung in the air, like a secret everyone already knew. The principal's door was half open. She stood behind it, arms crossed, lips tight. Principal Harding was the kind of woman who used silence as a weapon. Neat suit. Hair pulled back. Voice always measured, like she'd rehearsed every sentence before she spoke. "Mr. Miles. Thank you for coming." I stepped in. Shut the door behind me. "Where's Amira?" "She's in the counselor's office for now." "And why exactly is she not in class?" She sat down behind her desk. I remained standing. "There was an incident yesterday. During science class. Amira raised her voice at her teacher. Called him biased. Said he wouldn't have accused a white student the same way. She refused to apologize. I raised an eyebrow. That's it. Well, she also stormed out of class after being asked to stay. And when a staff member tried to redirect her, she said, and I quote, "Don't touch me. You don't get to control me like that." I paused. And what exactly was the teacher accusing her of? She allegedly copied another student's lab results. I shook my head slowly. "And did you check the facts?" Mr. Miles, we have procedures here. We can't have students, regardless of grades or background, disrupting classrooms, especially with aggressive tones. There it was again. That word. Aggressive. Not passionate. Not assertive. Not brave enough to stand up for herself. Just aggressive. I leaned in. My daughter has never been in trouble. Not once. She's 12. She loves chemistry and debate and anime and peppermint tea. And you're telling me she's a threat to the classroom? The principal didn't blink. Your daughter has a strong personality. We try to encourage leadership, but she challenged authority. That sets a dangerous precedent for the other students. A dangerous precedent? I repeated. You mean she refused to stay quiet? Principal Harding folded her hands. She escalated the situation. I stepped closer. No. She defended herself. Because she saw something unfair. And that's what I taught her to do. There was silence between us. A hard, uncomfortable silence. Then I said the words I came here to say. Bring her here. Now. 5 minutes later, Amira walked into the principal's office. Eyes low. Shoulders tense. She paused when she saw me. Her lips trembled just a little, but she held herself up. Just like her mother used to do when life cornered her. Hey, baby girl, I said softly. Dad. She looked from me to the principal. Principal Harding didn't waste time. Amira, please tell your father what happened in class yesterday. Amira glanced at me again. I gave her the look, the one that says, speak your truth. No fear. She took a breath. It started when Mr. Denning asked to see my lab notebook. I told him it was in my backpack. He grabbed it before I could get it myself. And then said, I probably didn't write it myself. That it looked copied. Why would he think that? I asked. Amira's hands clenched at her side. I don't know. I always take notes. I'm ahead in that class. But the other girl who sits next to me, Emma, she asked to borrow my work last week because she missed a day. I said okay. But he didn't say anything to her. Principal Harding cut in. Amira, your teacher said your responses were identical. Amira nodded. Because she copied from me. But I didn't report her. She was struggling. I just wanted to help. Isn't that what we're supposed to do? I stayed silent. And when I said it was unfair that he blamed me and not Emma, he told me I was making excuses. Then he told me I should watch my attitude. She looked at me now. Fully. Dad, I didn't yell. I just told him I wasn't going to be quiet when I was being treated differently. And then he told me to stay after class. But I was so angry. I knew if I stayed I'd cry. Or say something worse. So I left. I turned slowly back to the principal. You suspended her for that? Principal Harding replied carefully. We have to support our teachers. They are under a lot of pressure. And we can't allow students to defy their authority. But what about when authority gets it wrong? I asked. When it leans on stereotypes instead of facts? The principal's jaw tensed. You're wearing a uniform, Mr. Miles. You know structure matters. Order matters. I stared directly into her eyes. Yes. And that's exactly why I'm here. Because I also know justice matters. And my daughter deserves fairness, not suspicion. Not double standards. She shifted uncomfortably. I can review the file, she said finally. Perhaps we can lessen the punishment to a warning. No, I said. What you're going to do is clear her record. Put in writing that she did nothing wrong. And you're going to have a conversation with Mr. Denning about implicit bias. The room went quiet. Amira looked at me with a mix of pride and awe. That look? It made the whole visit worth it. The next morning, I didn't put on the uniform. Not because I was ashamed, but because I knew the man I needed to be today wasn't a cop. He was a father, a witness, a protector. I drove back to the school, sat across from Principal Harding again. This time, she didn't seem as confident. I reviewed the incident footage, she began. I didn't say anything. Just let her speak. I'll admit, it was enlightening. She tapped a few keys on her laptop, swiveled the screen toward me. There was Amira, sitting in class. Focused. Then the teacher, Mr. Denning, took her notebook, flipped through it. frowned, walked to his desk. You could see Emma whisper something, then glance guiltily at Amira. And then, the moment that struck me, Amira raised her hand, said something. The mic didn't pick up all the words, but you could read her body. She wasn't defiant. She was confused, frustrated. When the teacher waved her off, she simply stood, packed her things, and walked out with tears forming in her eyes. No yelling, no threats, no disruption. And right then, Principal Harding paused the video. I may have misjudged the situation, she said quietly. No, I told her. You didn't just misjudge. You made a decision that could have followed my daughter for years, because you believed someone else without asking her side. She nodded, eyes low. I see that now. Narration slows, deepens. The problem with bias isn't always hatred. Sometimes it's laziness. Sometimes it's comfort in believing what feels familiar, even when it's wrong. And for black girls like Amira, that's the most dangerous kind of bias. Because people don't yell it in their face. They document it. They suspend it. They silence it. Principal Harding looked up. I will make sure her record is cleared. And I'll schedule a discussion with staff on recognizing bias, especially where it's invisible. I gave her a long look. No handshake. No thank you. Just the truth. I'll be watching. Then I walked out. Narrator pauses. Shifts tone to reflection. Amira didn't need me to fight every battle. But she needed to know I'd stand beside her when the world tried to shrink her down to a label. And maybe that's the lesson for all of us. Being right isn't enough. You have to speak up. You have to show up. Even when it's uncomfortable. Especially then. The funny thing about Amira is, she's quiet. Not the kind of quiet that disappears into the crowd. The kind that watches. Measures. Remembers. She doesn't shout to be heard. She doesn't raise her voice to make a point. She just keeps showing up. A week after the suspension was reversed, I found her sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a blank page. You okay? I asked. She nodded slowly. I'm writing my essay for the science scholarship. I raised an eyebrow. The one they almost disqualified you for? Yeah, she said. That one. She took a deep breath. I thought about writing what they expect to hear, how I love science, how I want to help people. I think I want to write the truth. I pulled out a chair. Sat beside her. What truth? She looked at me, eyes fierce with calm fire. That being a black girl in science means always having to prove you belong, even when you already do. It didn't just win her the scholarship. It ended up published. Teachers shared it. Parents reposted it. A journalist even called us. And Mr. Denning? He didn't speak much to Amira after that. But I heard from another parent that he took a leave of absence. Attended bias training. He didn't come back the same. Sometimes change is slow. Sometimes it takes the silence of a strong girl to force a loud system to listen. And Amira, the girl they doubted, dismissed, disrespected? She stood on stage 6 months later, receiving an award from the city for academic excellence and leadership. The room gave her a standing ovation. But I just sat there, hands folded, watching, because I already knew. She didn't need applause. She just needed to know her truth mattered. We teach our kids to follow the rules. But what happens when the rules are written with cracks? What happens when the people enforcing them see your child as a problem instead of a person? That's when your voice matters most. Not to fight the system, but to stand with your child until the world finally sees what you've always seen. Part 6. 2 weeks after Amira's essay went public, I got a call from the school board. Not an email. Not a letter. A call. Mr. Brooks, the voice said, we'd like to invite you to speak at the upcoming Equity and Education Forum. I laughed. Why me? You're the parent of the girl, she replied. And a law enforcement officer. We think your voice matters. I paused. Because suddenly, all those years in uniform, all the times I had to toe the line between justice and silence, they started flooding back. I showed up that night in full uniform. Not to impress them, but to remind them that even within the system, there are those of us who see it clearly. I stood behind the podium, looked out at the crowd. Teachers, principals, parents, students. And I said this. My daughter was nearly erased from your system, not because she broke the rules, but because someone didn't see her as worthy of understanding. I wore this badge into your school. And suddenly you saw me differently. You listened. But I shouldn't have needed a uniform for that. I should have been heard as a father. And my daughter should have been respected as a student long before that. The room was silent. No applause. No murmurs. Just faces, listening. Finally, after I finished, a teacher came up to me quietly. I didn't know, she said. I've been in this system for 20 years, and I didn't see it. I looked at her. That's the thing about bias, I said. You don't have to see it to be part of it. But you do have to see it to fix it. Later that night, I sat with Amira on the porch. Told her everything. She leaned her head on my shoulder and said, I'm glad you wore the uniform, Dad. But I'm even more glad you didn't let it define you. She was right. The badge gave me access, but it didn't give me courage. That came from her. Sometimes the real test comes after the storm. When the headlines fade. When the apology letters are filed away. When the cameras stop showing up. That's when you see what people really learned. Amira returned to school with her head high. But the hallways weren't the same. Some kids smiled at her. Others stared. Some whispered things just loud enough. Teacher's pet. Only got her way, 'cause her dad's a cop. She thinks she's better than us now. It didn't surprise her. But it did sting. She came home one afternoon and dropped her backpack by the door harder than usual. I looked up from the couch. You okay? They don't get it, Dad. They think I'm a troublemaker or a charity case. She paced, frustrated. I didn't ask for any of this. I just wanted to defend myself. And now I'm either a symbol or a problem, nothing in between. I stood, walked to her slowly and said, symbols fade. Problems get solved. But truth? That sticks around. She looked confused. Your truth made them uncomfortable. That's not your burden, that's their growing pain. Not an essay. Not a letter. A proposal. She went to the principal, the new interim principal, not Mr. Denning, and requested to start a student dialogue club focused on identity, respect, and understanding. I still remember the proposal's first line. This isn't about me. It's about what happens when we stop listening. They approved it. And suddenly, every Thursday after school, a small room in the East Wing filled up with kids who had something to say, and finally, a space to say it. White kids. Black kids. Asian. First gen. LGBTQ. Stories flowed. Walls cracked. Not everything changed overnight. But some things did. A teacher stopped grading participation based on who spoke the most, and started grading on thoughtfulness. A student who'd never said a word in class found her voice. Another realized he'd been interrupting girls without noticing. Little things. But real things. Change doesn't always start with a march. Sometimes, it starts with a girl who refused to shrink. Funny thing is, we spend years teaching our kids how to grow up in this world. How to stay safe. How to speak politely. How to follow the rules, even when the rules don't love them back. But sometimes, it's your child who ends up teaching you. I thought I understood justice. I wore it on my chest. I swore an oath to it. I believed I could spot it, or the lack of it, from a mile away. But I missed something. I missed how injustice can wear a smile, can sit behind a polished desk, can call itself policy and still be poisoned. Watching Amira stand her ground, with dignity, not rage, made me confront something I hadn't wanted to see. That maybe I'd spent years trying to succeed within a system that was never meant for us. That maybe true strength isn't in surviving it, but in changing it, with truth. One night, I walked past her room and saw her light still on. I knocked softly. She was writing again. What is it this time? I asked. She smiled but didn't look up. Just notes for tomorrow's session. Then she added, I want to help people speak when it's hard. Because no one should feel small just for telling the truth. Right then, I saw something I hadn't seen before. Not just a girl growing up, but the leader rising. She didn't need me to rescue her. She needed me to stand beside her, to listen, to support, to trust her voice, even when the world didn't. That was the hardest and most important parenting lesson I ever learned. So when people ask me what changed, I tell them this. My daughter didn't just survive a system that tried to silence her. She taught it to listen. There's a moment, right before truth pierces the quiet. It's not loud. It's not flashy. It's still. But you feel it, like the world holding its breath. That's how it was the day the school board held their community town hall. 3 months after the incident. 3 months of pressure, letters, news interviews, and hallway murmurs. 3 months of silence from the board itself. Until that day, they finally invited the public in. Microphones. Notepads. Fold-out chairs. A gym filled with tension. I didn't plan to speak. I was there to support Amira. She wore her school colors. Hair braided tight. A single notebook in her hand. When her name was called, she walked up to the mic without trembling. Good evening. My name is Amira Harris. I'm 15. And I go to this school, or at least I used to until I was told I didn't belong here. I'm not here to be angry. I'm here because the people in this room make choices that affect students like me, students who are often told we're too loud, too confident, too much. I'm not asking for pity. I'm asking for presence. For listening. For leadership that sees our humanity before our transcripts. She stepped back from the mic. The room was silent, but not empty. You could feel people breathing different. Like they just heard something real, and couldn't go back to pretending. That night, other students spoke. Parents too. Some angry. Some tearful. Even a few teachers stood and shared things they'd been too afraid to say. It was like Amira's voice unlocked a door. And everyone else found the courage to walk through it. The school board didn't clap. They just listened. And for once, that was enough. Because silence broke that night. Not just the board's. Ours. And once truth gets loose, it doesn't go back in the box. I wore a uniform my whole career. Belt. Boots. It told people who I was. Or at least who I served. It gave me authority. Respect. Sometimes fear. But here's what I realized. My daughter didn't need a uniform to command the room. She didn't need a badge to be believed. She wore her truth, and it was stronger than anything stitched onto fabric. After that town hall, things changed. Not overnight. Not dramatically. But steadily. The school reinstated Amira's enrollment. Not as a favor, but as a correction. They updated their policies, added equity training, student-led panels, open-door reporting for bias. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. And Amira, she didn't just return to school. She ran for student body president the next semester. And won. At her first speech as president, she said, "I used to think leadership meant being the loudest. Now I know, it means lifting the quietest voices." And when she said that, she looked right at me. Not for validation, but with pride. Because she knew I'd finally learned to listen. There are 2 kinds of power in this world. The kind that demands obedience. And the kind that inspires change. Amira chose the second. And in doing so, she taught me something my decades in uniform never could. That true authority doesn't come from what's worn on the outside, but from the truth you carry within. One who thought he knew everything. But it took a 15-year-old girl, my daughter, to show me what courage really looks like. Not in anger. Not in fists. But in calm conviction. In quiet resilience. In standing tall, even when the world tells you to sit down. And if you're lucky, you live long enough to be led by the very people you once thought needed protecting.